Dissertations of Sherlock Holmes, Vittoria The Circus Belle is copyright 2025 by its author, Sandor Jay Sonnen. All rights reserved. Dad took us to the circus. It seems like yesterday that your mother and I took the two of you to the circus, our father said to my brother and I as he turned over a few ribeye steaks on the metal bars of the outdoor barbecue in the park that surrounded Atascadero State Hospital. This aspect of the grounds surrounding the state hospital never made sense to me. The entrance to the hospital is off California's famous road, El Camino Real, that runs north and south at various locations within the state. In the city of Atascadero, the portion of El Camino Real runs beside US 101, itself a famous California highway. Upon turning off of El Camino Real onto San Rafael Road, one travels a full half-mile to the hospital's entrance, but along the way, one passes a vast park with tennis and basketball courts, a community center, and benches and barbecues throughout. You can see all these places as you get closer to the buildings that make up the hospital complex. I always found this arrangement strange. Today, Dad got permission to leave the hospital proper and take my brother and I to this park setting and make for us a barbecue featuring steaks and salmon and baked potatoes and vegetables, the last of these two side dishes wrapped up in aluminum foil as they baked, resting on the metal of the large metal structure Dad had filled with charcoal briquettes and fired up as soon as we arrived. "Dad," said my brother, "are you going to tell us once more about how you and Mom made out at the top of the circus tent in San Luis Obispo?" "Do I ever repeat my stories to you in Puga?" Dad defended himself. "Constantly, Dad," was Greg's response. "You left Greg and I by ourselves at ages 10 and 7. The two of you said you were going to get hot dogs and sodas for all of us," I objected. "Your mother and I did come back with hot dogs and drinks," said our father. 45 minutes later, I once more objected. The Ringling Brothers' music was just beginning, and the main circus dude had taken center ring, and it was then you and Mom appeared out of nowhere. I continued my upset. I never remembered this event with the happiness our father always seemed to have remembered it. When he discusses the episode, the tone of his voice is always a combination of nostalgic memory and gentle repose. My brother and I remember being scared to death. "You loved the clowns," our father continued his reflection of that fateful day. "The clowns were idiots," I said. Giba, what did you think about our day at the circus?" Dad asked my brother. "Why would anyone want to go to a circus?" My brother answered him. "How so?" asked our father. "Dad," Greg began his harangue, "the circus played an important role in the later 19th and early 20th centuries. It brought to the people living in the small towns and farming villages the ability to see animals and attractions otherwise not within their scope of perception. On any daily basis, Greg took a moment to look at the stakes. Dad was moving here and there over the coals. He continued, "But there was nothing at the circus Michael and I didn't know about or already understand. We weren't raised in Kansas in the 1920s, so the circus was for us a performative act without consequence." "Yeah, what Greg said," I smiled as I made my come-along joke related to my brother's circumlocution. Our father began opening the boats he had made out of the foil to contain the green beans he had placed over the fire. He did the same with the baked potatoes, and soon the large oval-shaped platters he had arranged for our lunch were filled by him with these side dishes. "I have for the both of you another of my Sherlock Holmes stories." Our father smiled as he delivered to us this news. "And it has to do with the circus," was my comment. "Have I become that predictable?" He broadened his smile. Greg looked up. "Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson went to the circus?" "Why shouldn't they?" Dad answered. "I never imagined they had circuses in England," Greg commented. "They certainly had them throughout all of Europe. Not merely Western Europe, but throughout the Russian Empire during the 18th and 19th and even 20th centuries, when Russia had an empire." We let Father go on about his pontification over circuses because what was important to us was that he had come to the point in his barbecue where he was serving up to us large pieces of salmon, and for each of us a perfect ribeye. We dug into our lunch as Dad flipped through the pages of his new story.
Dissertations of Sherlock Holmes. 6. Vittoria The Circus Belle by Sandor Jay Sonnen. In the spring of 1894, I was recovering emotionally from the understanding that the world still contained in it Mr. Sherlock Holmes. Holmes had been emphatic that after he had arranged for the capture of Colonel Sebastian Moran, it was perfectly safe for me to resume living at the Baker Street residence I had so often shared with him over many years. It was in May that I found myself preparing my personal property for a move from where I had lived for over 3 years, back to the Baker Street residence. But out of a fancy, I thought it perfect that in that same month Holmes joined me for a sojourn to the far northwest coast, and a visit to Blackpool for the opening of a tower in the heart of what had become a thriving attraction, dedicated to the use of electricity for the benefit of entertainment and amusement. I was surprised that my companion immediately seconded the suggestion, letting me in on his excitement over the march of progress and its effect on England. After 2 days' journey by rail, including the local Lytham to Fleetwood, Holmes and I found ourselves with 3 days to spare before the great event that would be the opening of the Blackpool Tower, and we installed ourselves at one of the hotels along the city's famous promenade at Water's Edge. We were a mile south of the town's centre and soon-to-be dedicated tower attraction. This distance proved an excellent buffer from having to otherwise deal at every moment with a throng of tourists and those who made a living, plying their trade by separating those tourists from their shillings, 1 penny at a time. We spent most of our Friday late afternoon and evening in the way most visitors to Blackpool spend their time playing the various games of chance, dotted throughout the amusement area of the resort. Especially holding Holmes's interest was the slow coming of the dark, and how the town dealt with this by the generating of illumination that lit up every place around us. In not one area did we find natural gas or steam to be the basis of either lumen or power, and admiration for this was the common topic of discussion by all who surrounded us. We enjoyed the electric tram that ran from Crocker to Dean Street, along the promenade, and even Holmes allowed himself to join in his fellow passengers, who cheered every clang of bell and crossing of the major streets. A part of me returned in spirit to that moment when only 1 month previous, Holmes had reappeared into my life in the person of a doddering bookseller who carried tomes throughout the city from a fictional business on Church Street. My shouts of delight on the tram were mixed with Holmes having returned to the world for the benefit of those who love justice. And then there was the tower. It was in its own right a sight, just over 500 feet and something of a miniature version of the Eiffel, which had inspired its creation. We agreed upon seeing it that we would return for its opening ceremony on Monday and wait what would probably be a tedious queue to travel up its lifts. I knew from press accounts that the tower already had its first passengers on its lifts the previous year, when representatives of the press became the first members of the public to enjoy that privilege. But this did not dismay Holmes nor myself as we made our tower plan, and it was nearly midnight when we returned to our rooms at Promenade Princess Inn. Saturday morning found me writing in our shared sitting room and Holmes sleeping in. I did not disturb him and arranged for the girl come later with a breakfast tray at around 10. With Holmes's late breakfast came a copy of the previous evening's Northern Daily Telegraph, which the innkeeper told us the community of Blackpool treated as their daily morning paper. All the news that anyone would need to know 12 hours late was the local humour in relation to this tabloid's tardiness on the West Coast. "Here, Holmes, is a case worthy of your talents," I jested at my friend. "Tell me," said he, chipping away at his egg with the edge of his spoon, "a crime wave in Blackpool. While we spent our time on trains getting here, 2 thefts rocked the place of leisure we were near to just yesternight. Crime precedes you, my dear fellow." "Then I've arrived just in time, it would seem," smiled Holmes. "You would need to get to the bottom of each event and solve the disappearance of 2 artifacts, one worth an estimated £3.10. Watson, you are having fun at my expense. I am glad you are able to milk suspense from this poor cow you play at." It's from the section which lists various matters reported to the police in the several sections of Lancaster that would be the outliers of the general communities for which the paper serves. There is such a section for Blackpool, so I suppose this comes from a Daily Wire that sends a report to the offices of the Northern Telegraph. It reports a new theft and remembers a previous one. Last night there was stolen from the manager's office of the newly minted Tower Circus a large mural on canvas depicting the circus's principal performers in traditional circus poster style. After reading this aloud, I looked at Holmes and said, "I presume that means the thing looked like the cover of a programme." "I would suppose," he responded. I read some more and gave to Holmes a summary of the rest. The mural on canvas measured 8 feet by 10 feet and was the centre point of interest inside of this office. It had been made for the manager and was only completed a week ago. The manager paid the artist, the man who does indeed create the programmes, £5 to paint the canvas. It was only placed into the office for a few days until it was stolen sometime Thursday evening. The manager came back from his supper to find it had vanished, and a cursory search of the circus did nothing in the way of finding any trace of it. You said there was another theft this theft caused to re-mention. I scanned down the column. From the same office and at the same time the day before, meaning on Wednesday, was stolen the baton of the circus's feature equestrian, estimated at not more than a few pounds. It just had added to it costume gems to refract the light as this girl, Vittoria, performs with it while standing atop a horse as it gallops about. A bark of laughter came from my companion before he took the first bite of his breakfast. It is good to know, Watson, that should I ever retire to West Lancaster, I would not be bored for lack of occasional work. That afternoon, Holmes and I divided our pleasure as I took a walk south from where we stayed and away from the amusement centre of Blackpool, and he enjoyed bathing in the sea. He was so invigorated by the experience that he suggested we go to the bathhouse and take in the steam room, a luxury for which we had on occasion indulged ourselves. The establishment was left over from a few decades previous, when the area was famous for people who wished to take the cure for a number of reasons, from genuine ailment to caprice. "She is overwrought and in a state of panic, and this is being kept out of the story," one man said to his companion as they entered the room and took places on the lower bench. "Certainly another can be found for her." "I should think any circus would have many of these batons." "No, no. It is sentimental. She has used it for all of her career. For several years it has been her staple prop. She has these jewels added to it, and it is stolen that moment." Queer, the voices of the men echoed through the tiled room, competing only with the occasional sound of steam pressured from a pipe valve along the wall. The other 4 men sharing the room were drowsy, and Holmes and I were alone in listening to the men as their voices, though of regular projection, were made easy to comprehend. Yes, she gives it up to her manager for these fake gems added to it, and it is only then that it is lost to her. The man facing me during this conversation caught my eye. Though my companion's eyes were closed, I knew he would have heard the men talking. "You are speaking of this matter reported in the paper," I said to the man who looked at me watching the two of them. "This Vittoria equestrian?" "Yes," the man said. "We are only visiting for the long weekend. We read of it this morning, and the brief story coupled with it, the disappearance of this mural on canvas. Yes, we all rely on the Northern Daily Telegraph for our news." The man spoke again. "Preston," he said in the way of a brief introduction. "Wales." The other man turned towards me and bowed his head. "Watson," said I. "My friend Holmes." Holmes did not stir. "Good to know you, gentlemen," said Preston. "The same," I responded. "Then this bathhouse is used by the locals as much as those visiting the beaches?" "Certainly, sir," he responded. "There used to be 3 or 4 of these places in the 50s and 60s, but they went out of fashion. This is now the only place you can enjoy baths in the Turkish sense." "Isn't this business at the circus singular?" "I mean for your community," I said to the man. "I would normally say that things of this nature happen at circus companies more likely than at other places," Preston said, "but I happen to know something of this troupe." Since it was organised as the Tower Circus and has been given its permanent home under the tower, there hasn't been one police complaint or out-of-line cast member. That is unusual for a troupe of circus performers, but this is no ordinary circus. This group is going to have a permanent home, and in a place where they won't have to hawk for punters. By this you mean the troupe is not the sort that would give in to the more meddlesome nature sometimes found in performers, and resort to childish pranks and misbehaviour. I further cajoled. I mean just that, he responded, and Vittoria is a sweet young little dove who wouldn't bring to anyone a bit of anger. She inspires the best ideas, the man said, probably being unnecessarily dramatic for the woman's sake. Then what would be the explanation for taking from her something everyone in the company knew would cause her emotional distress? Said Holmes, keeping his eyes closed, but making it known to Preston and Wales he was quite awake and following our conversation fully. That, sir, Preston said, is more of a mystery than the actual disappearance of the stick. You, sir, work on the electric tramline, Holmes said to the man as he partially lifted his body from its reclined position. Do I know you, sir? I thought you were here on holiday. Well, though yours is a new profession, inasmuch as electricity is concerned, there is a recurring pattern in the way gentlemen of your profession become scarred along their arms. If we were not in the steam room, I would not have been able to see this was the case. By Jove, and yes, sir, that is a fact. We're all getting struck by a hot wire now and again. Most of the time it's of no consequence, but every few months it can be a different story. If I had a mind to it, I would make myself rubberized gloves that go above my elbows. It is a new field, said Holmes. Perhaps one day what you suggest will be as average as other precautions taken by men who work in danger. Perhaps just that, sir, just that. So you know the Vittoria girl from electrical work you do for the circus? Asked Holmes. Yes, sir. That I do. I have done work for the area just under the tower, where a base for a tower normally would be, but where instead there is a circus. This area may as well be underground. I mean, it comes off as if it's in a railway tunnel, so electric lighting is the ticket to make the whole show work. Your understanding of these circus people comes from your interaction with them, I interjected. Just as you say, replied Mr. Preston, and then this theft of the mural. What of it? Asked Holmes. And on the very day after the baton is taken, this canvas is stolen from the same room. Well, sir, this I can certainly share with you. There is this office, and it's very impressive in size, but not in appointment. It's high enough, but there are only some bare pieces of furnishing. And there is a desk where the manager sits, and there is a camp bed that serves for his place to nap or sleep overnight. And there is one cabinet where I suppose there are files. Then, on its own wall of canvas, near no furnishings near it to block the view of it, there is this large canvas sheet, like it was one of those paintings lords would have in their homes of fox hunts or nature. The canvas was the officer's version of a tapestry from a few 100 years ago. Makes sense to you? It does, said Holmes. I only saw it the one time, but the manager, Bob Ridgemore, he tells me he had it to define his office. That's why it's all by itself, with nothing to detract from looking at it. A statement, so to speak. It certainly was that you do seem to know the office completely. Holmes prodded the man. Yes, sir. We're going to put electricity into these rooms as well, just as if they were out in the open on the area surrounding the tower. We'll replace all of the kerosene and bring a very new look to everything. I know most of the areas under the tower. Then this poor man's tapestry was hung up by what method? I asked. It was hung up by some high hooks against the canvas that acts as a wall, and there were grommets put into the canvas. Several of them, I do not know the number. These were fitted into hooks that have been fitted into the canvas that, as I said, create something of a wall in the office. All of the rooms in these halls that box around the inside perimeter of the underground are of course canvases lifted up and into structural position, as is the case with any tent material used to fabricate an office or private living quarters. No wonder employment in this circus is so prized, I commented. I'm certain hardly any other circus performer or rigger who works there has ever had it so well, for their accommodation to mirror daily living in a home of sorts. Yes, Mr. Watson, said Preston, the cast members say exactly that. And like the baton, the mural on the canvas was removed while the manager had his supper, and the office remained empty, inquired Holmes. Mr. Preston reflected. Well, here I know what you know. I wasn't in the office since I last saw it there, and it was taken Thursday night, and like you, I read about it this morning in the story from yesterday evening's paper. But I was at the circus on Thursday morning when others told me of Vittoria's sorrow related to the theft of this baton of hers. My friend said to Preston, I, like Mr. Wales, agree that any similar prop would serve. However, many performers are sentimental and superstitious, and they are not keen on an alteration to anything that touches upon their art. After the bath, we walked the mile up the promenade to the amusement centre. Along the way, not far from the first business related to the centre, Holmes' eye caught a satellite office for the police, and he walked to its entrance with me in tow. Is the sergeant about? He asked a constable standing at the front desk. This man left, returned, and once more stood at his original place. A minute afterward, a sergeant came from the back area to join us. How may I help you, gentlemen? I am interested in seeking out the Bareback Rider of the Tower Circus, who had her baton stolen or misplaced. I didn't want to upset an ongoing investigation. The sergeant responded to this with a perplexed expression. Then he said, What a strange interest. He smiled and continued, Is this a hobby of yours, random inquiry into misdemeanours or negligent misplacement? I have an interest in any crime when coupled with the singular, Holmes said to the man. I have no objection, the three-stripe man said to my friend. If the manager there gives you leave to ask questions to his people, you will not be bothering anything we've done in the matter of a minor report. Thank you, Holmes said, and we turned and left the office. Did you really believe you were upsetting any apple cart that was the centre of police interest that has to have been nothing more than a one-sentence jot on the blotter? I found my friends asking for permission to create an investigation to be rather quaint. It was for a slightly different reason, he told me. I want to be able to say to any of the circus people a phrase implying there is some kind of support from the police for my calling on their doorstep. I nodded an understanding, but my thoughts went to a place feeling no one would care what anyone would do when it came to such a petty theft. Will you seek out this Vittoria? I asked. My first desire would be to see someone in authority, he answered. Do you have someone in mind? I would like a word with the manager about these thefts as a whole, and not solely the girl who lost her baton. Why so? Patterns interest me, and here we have something. Life goes on for some time without anything out of the regular, and then 2 nights in a row, this man's office is invaded, and something from it stolen. In each case it was something that cannot be used by another person for its designed purpose. At least the mural cannot be displayed, that much is certain. Of course, the baton could be used by a girl in the same manner as the Circus Belle, but it seems to me an odd thing to do, to risk a theft when a similar baton can be obtained through traffic. Also, a baton can be specially constructed based on given descriptions. There is no need to steal one. Then there is the pattern of the thefts occurring at the same time of day. I would be surprised if this manager has not determined to take some action so that his office not be trespassed in future during his evening meal. It intrigues me, all of it, and I wonder whether the manager would speak with me about the particulars of what happened. There was no problem entering the construction at the base of the magnificent structure for what was the Tower Circus, but when we did enter the vast arena beneath, a man approached us with a less than kind disposition. Gentlemen, the troupe is in rehearsal. We open in 2 days. Tickets for Monday evening's performance may be obtained at the small tent not far from where you entered. I was interested in speaking with the manager. Is he about? Holmes took on a business-like demeanour as he addressed a man in brown pants and braces with a light checked shirt. Perhaps you did not hear me so well, he gave back a curt response. Come now, there is no need for such an attitude, said Holmes. We are here on a matter of importance and perhaps of interest to your manager. We are not salesmen, nor are we here to spend his time on a fruitless pursuit. We are here on account of the recent thefts, I interceded. If this is not a good time for us to discuss this with your manager, we can come later. Certainly there is no harm in your finding out if he is available. We will wait here and not attempt to go beyond these rows of seats. The man considered. Geoffrey, he hollered at another man. The man turned from a rope of rigging he appeared to be inspecting. See if the boss has time to speak to two gentlemen about the painted canvas. The other man waved at him and walked down the path between the rows of bench seating, disappearing into some tunnel formed by a large opening of canvas. This Geoffrey soon returned with another man whose appearance demonstrated an air of authority. Holmes wasted no time in stating his business. "You are Robert Ridgmore," said Holmes. "I wish to ask you about the painted mural on canvas. Has it been recovered?" "No," said the man I remembered by name to be the manager of the Tower Circus. "Do you have a few minutes we may discuss what happened?" "No, sir." "I do not. Unless you have something straight away to say about the matter and how you know what you know, I do not have any time for any who are here to merely discuss with me the theft." "I was wondering whether you have determined a connection between the two thefts. Did you not find it strange there are no such thefts in your troupe, and then two in a row, and both such strange items?" Holmes's question appeared to brush aside the manager's comment. There were shouts from the performance area as a horse was being quickly led around in a circle, a woman standing upon the animal's back, and a man standing aside the horse during this practice, looking over the happening to ensure the girl would have a means of assistance should she fail to hold herself balanced atop the beautiful white mount. Knowing how a circus had only one belle who was an equestrian, dressed in the way she was, I knew this had to be Vittoria, whose baton had been stolen. She looked to be about 20. She stood atop the beautiful mount that had nothing on its back, while her feet had on them only the same slip shoes worn by ballerinas. She was adorned by a blue frilly performance tunic and skirt, and both rider and horse had stripes and stars of gold throughout. Her medium-long blonde hair hung freely below her shoulders, and the only thing else she wore was a kind of tiara of shiny decoration that refracted the lights flooding the centre of the performance area. Her face was a mixture of many looks, and her race was impossible to determine. I wondered whether her hair was a genuine blonde, as it didn't make sense with the mixture of background her skin showed. "Who may you be, and what is your business?" asked the manager, taking some care in addressing Holmes. "I am in fact here to speak with your equestrian. As you can see, she is very busy," stated the manager. "What I do see is a girl who is disturbed by the loss of perhaps the only property that matters to her, and I would offer to her my assistance." "Sir," I addressed the man, "my friend only wishes some 10 minutes with the girl." "What can be lost? When we leave after this short interview, she may be happier for the time spent, and that would translate to you equally believing a benefit has been conferred." The man made an expression of harried acquiescence and signalled the young man running beside the horse's gallop to slow the beast and bring its rider over to our group. She walked to us in puzzlement, and my colleague took her by the arm and guided her some several feet from the men who managed the performances. "My name is Sherlock Holmes, and I am here because someone of your acquaintance wishes you receive assistance related to the loss of your baton, and why it may have been taken and whether it may be recovered." "Oh, how so?" The girl was more excited than surprised by my friend's offer of interest. "We spoke with an electrician who attributes your inability to concentrate on your performance with the theft of your favourite prop. Do you believe this is the case and that you are a different performer without it?" "I can think of nothing else, other than the disappearance of the baton, Mr. Holmes. It is all that has been on my mind since Wednesday evening. May I ask you some questions about the baton and its significance?" "Yes, of course you may, though it is rather unusual that you, a stranger, would take more an interest in its theft than those whose job it is to care." "Well, we shall see what can become of my taking an interest in this." "What are your questions?" asked the girl. "I would first ask you why you attach so much significance to the baton." "That is no secret. Everyone who knows something of my past knows it was gifted me by my uncle, held by him until I was able to use it. It was my mother's, a woman of whom I have little memory. She was an equestrian and famous in her own right, and was 30 when she gave birth to me, and ended her run as the star of the circus troupe of which she was a part. She began her new work as a mentalist and gypsy palm reader, rather dull compared to her previous employment, but that is typical of a woman who has a career in a circus environment. When I was 5, she died, and I was placed under the care of my aunt and uncle, and the baton was saved by my uncle, and only given to me on my 16th birthday, when I was given a part of lesser importance than I have now, at a previous circus. I became very attached to it, and have never performed without it. And it was in the manager's office because Holmes prodded the girl. All of these lights. Its concentration on whomever is at centre, this person or act enjoys a bathing in a flood of electrical lumen. It was suggested, against my desire, that my baton become bejewelled at its ends, to create a very refractory property to my motion of its twirls. The manager insisted, and it was either alter my baton or work with another that would create refractions. I see, said Holmes. Yes, you would have to make that choice. And so the item had work done on it to achieve this end, and the work meant it was kept for some time in the office of the manager. But only for that one day, Mr. Holmes. In fact, only for a few hours. It was only to be overnight that the cement holding these glass pieces needed to harden, and I was assured it would be returned to me the next day for practice. Mr. Preston, the electrician, tells me this troupe does not suffer from the usual jealousies associated with circus performers. I would not say that is entirely accurate. We do have our squabbles. But what is different is the permanence of the circus and the cast members not having to travel. I use the term cast member because our being at the Tower Circus has the effect of making us feel we are putting on a theatrical show and are not part of a band of typical circus performers. It is quite unique in what is the standard operation, and many in our profession covet what we have here. But I doubt that would result in the motive for what really is a petty theft. I mean, I do not believe it was stolen by a member of a rival troupe. That would be absurd, I agree. But what of a rival to you personally? There is no such person of whom I am aware, Mr. Holmes. No such person at all. I am very proud and happy to work for the Tower troupe, and the circus before I worked at this one was for me a wonderful experience. I have no grievance, and to my knowledge, there is no one who harbours any smouldering anger toward myself. Then certainly the theft is interesting. While the baton means something to you personally, in an emotional way, it has no real value, in that it cannot be exchanged for any important benefit, observed Holmes. Yes, Mr. Holmes, it has no value except only to me. And this mural painted on canvas, have you seen it? He asked her. Of course. Everyone has seen it. Mr. Ridgmore is very proud of it and has displayed it in such a way to define his office. When one enters, it is there before them. Talking with him or meeting there for any purpose, one is completely taken by the work of art, and it reminds one of a traditional circus poster. The girl spoke kindly of the work of art. You have no idea who might have taken it? Asked Holmes. I have no idea, sir. Its theft is as strange as the theft of my baton. Vittoria expression showed her to appear fascinated over why my friend should ask her for an opinion about what may be the motives of the theft. Holmes ended his questions with a smile to the young lady. Thank you for your time. I know it is precious to you, and as time moves us close to your premiere performance, you hold a hope to regain your signature property. That is true, Mr. Holmes. But time spent in aid of the search for my baton is time well spent. I, too, smiled at Vittoria as we left her, finding ourselves before the canvas openings that formed hallways to the many residences of those who were members of the circus cast, and the few sections formed in a similar way to create offices and storage areas. This is such a different arrangement, Watson. Nearly dormitories for living instead of the typical tents or railroad cars. Holmes looked up and back along the line of openings in the tent material, which formed a canvas series of doors within the area where we stood. It is unusual, certainly, but there is a permanence to it all compared with the typical lifestyle that goes with such a career. We were directed to Mr. Ridgmore's office, which was located further into the hall, at the far end of where we had entered. The canvas was opened, and inside was the manager and another man and woman, who appeared to be involved with a blank poster board. On it had been drawn the face of what appeared to be a clown. They turned from this circle of discussion and looked to us as we stood at the threshold of the room. "Something," said Ridgewood from the centre of this group. His wrinkled face made more wrinkles as he frowned and stood impatiently. "I hoped to be given another moment of your time," stated Holmes. "You continue on your query, sir?" the man asked. "I concluded my inquiry with your Bareback Rider. I am here to ask you a question about the painted canvas that was stolen from your office. I am told it looks something like a traditional circus poster." The man's face changed. He stood taller, and one of his thumbs found its way to a suspender. "What is your concern in this matter, sir?" "My name is Sherlock Holmes, and I had a conversation with the sergeant of the constables, who was too busy, he told me, to take the time to look into the theft of this mural on canvas that the evening paper reported you very much prized. I offered to look into the matter and speak with you, and he gave me leave to do so, and in fact endorsed my visiting you on the very matter, to ask you if there was some way I might give you my assistance." The man to his right said to my friend, "You are Sherlock Holmes?" "Sherlock Holmes, the detective." "The same," Holmes responded. "But, sir, Sherlock Holmes is dead. Dead for now more than 2 years." I nearly blushed at this. Holmes smiled. "I was dead for a while, that is so. But as your tower's foundation stone was laid in that same year I died, your tower was completed in that same year I returned to life." The man who commented on Holmes's death smiled at this incantation. Finally, Manager Ridgemore spoke. "Strange how this duty was given you by the sergeant. I know him well. That is, I have come to know him during these 2 years we have worked to open the circus. And he has asked you to learn more about the loss of our property. Well, that is an interesting turn. I would have thought its disappearance would have been marked down as nothing more than a trifle in the eyes of the constabulary." "I did not mean to imply that was not the case," said my friend. "But as I was available and had spoken with another who had an equal interest in your Star Belle, learning to where her baton had gone to, I offered to take up both matters as a service to the sergeant." "All right then, that sounds fair. Well, here we are, and here is where the canvas presented, on display against this plain canvas curtain. Indeed, you can see how there are hooks for the grommets that are on the mural canvas." Holmes and I took a moment to appreciate this faux wall of canvas that indeed was mirrored by 3 others surrounding the office's interior. While looking at each of these, Holmes walked around the office's interior perimeter and touched each of them. They gave way and made bends as he did so. These walls of tent canvas that acted as dividers to create separate rooms had behind them the canvas that was the actual material that made up the real walls of what we understood to be a tent. It proved a curious arrangement. Holmes's question to the man and the man's answer confirmed my understanding of what I was looking at. "Mr. Ridgemore, what is the canvas that acts in the same manner walls act? What is the circumstance of their creation?" "A bit of an unusual setup, certainly, but not more unusual than any other community where many people's living situation is under one large tent. In another year or 2, should the circus be a success, we will have genuine building materials under the tower, and we will have created for us walls of wood and plaster, and doors fitted into the walls, just as you have in any home or office in England. But when we were given the go-ahead for the creation of a circus that would not travel and would instead be a permanent attraction here in Blackpool, the city and the financial backers of the tower project did not want to invest in the creation of building wood and plaster walls, should the circus be a failure and the space have to be made into some other attraction. And since every performer and rigger has known only canvas or trailer to be their accommodation at any circus, no one objected to bringing in tent canvas here under the tower for the first year or 2, while the city determines there will be a sustainable financial success, enough to make real, permanent constructions for the future." "But," said Holmes, "it appears you have doubled over a secondary tent material to create your living spaces and offices and storage areas." Yes, Mr. Holmes, agreed the manager. Only by having this secondary canvas throughout could we create the result of specific room areas. For the outer canvas could never have been shaped into individual sections. Are there these hooks throughout the various rooms, if we choose to call them that? Holmes asked. One of our families did that, and it became a fad that others copied. Needless to say, ours is a world of inserting grommets and hooks to achieve all sorts of purposes. Someone here began doing this to hang some family photo or other things, and everyone began to do the same. To attach my canvas painting to the wall, there has to be a free canvas behind it with hooks attached to that canvas, just as you see before you. Mr. Ridgmore had a note of both pride and sorrow in his speech, as he regarded the now empty space of material, with bare grommets and his artwork no longer hooked into it. One more question, if you do not mind. Holmes directed his speaking to the manager. I presume the lower bottom areas of the outer tent behind this canvas can be lifted, and any person could use such means to travel from one tented room space to another, or, if be by the main tent, out to the world at large. Well, there are tent stakes throughout the lower lines of all of the canvases to ensure the walls, if one wishes to call them that, stay in place, answered Ridgmore. Then your circus is both in an enclosed area and in some places surrounded by outdoors, observed Holmes. That would mean a man could enter or leave from under the canvas of this tented area, in the same way 10-year-olds have been doing since time immemorial, digging out the stakes to widen their movement at the base of the canvas to see your acts during their practices. What you describe, Mr. Holmes, is a possibility for how one may have entered from the outside and stolen the canvas and left the same way. He would have had to avoid the man whose job it is to walk the outside perimeter. But he has many duties and, well, frankly, no one had ever believed someone would come from the outside to take anything from the inside. Such a person could only get to places where there are no valuables, and no action of that kind would be worth the candle. And of course we would prosecute anyone who is caught stealing from us, even if it be the smallest item. We are vulnerable that the outside world of tourist visitors who come to Blackpool are so very close to our working and living areas, and if we did not prosecute, it would get around that we were a soft mark. So your office was made a mark, said Holmes. I did notice the paper reported that unlike in the case of the baton, the mural's theft has a suspect. Yes, Mr. Holmes, and if it were he would be long gone from here and would have been found by now. This he being? The son of a man I had to let go and who is not a member of our troupe. He approached you. The afternoon the day the baton was taken and the following day the mural was taken. That would be Wednesday then? Wednesday, yes. Wednesday afternoon, Robert Geller, Jr. came to see me without appointment, nor asking for the slightest leave. He got past our men and found his way here, and walked into this room just as you entered. He was immediately curt and strong-headed, and cursed me from the off. The following day, Thursday, he did just the same, and without leave he dug into his rant of oaths, and swore he would get even with me. How came his father to be unemployed? It was nothing more than a business decision. We are a new company, and I have to build our foundation on people who I believe will be stayers. Geller the senior was a wire walker in his 40s and worked alone and had no other offering, and only his son who he was training. But the junior did not take to it, and in fact did not like our craft. For this reason, I made the decision that Robert Geller, that is the senior, had to be cut. He left immediately to where I do not know. On Wednesday his son shows up, and from exactly where you are standing, he gives to me his view of the world and my place in it. I told him to be off, and he left, but not before more of his curses. How long a time between his leaving and the batons being missing? A few hours. I went out for my supper, and when I returned, it was gone. It had been here all the day, as Vittoria had a rest day, and her horses had to be looked after on Wednesday. So Wednesday was chosen to be the day when we would mount these glass jewels to her baton, and it rested here on my desk for the entire day, and would do so overnight. But before turning in, I found the prop had been removed. Naturally, I thought the girl had taken it, so she might have it with her in her room. I suppose the cement would have dried enough that movement was now possible, and I thought no more about it, and turned in for the night. The next morning, she came here wanting it, and you know the rest. We looked about and ultimately had a meeting of the troupe. No one had any idea of its whereabouts, and I contacted the constable, and the theft was marked down as a petty crime, and naturally the blotter's news was made part of the following evening's edition. And on Thursday, you found you had a crime spree on your hands. What a bunch of absurdity, these thefts. Yes, Mr. Holmes, and again, during my supper. This time the canvas is stolen, but unlike the baton, I noticed this immediately and take the matter very seriously. The police came out, and the matter investigated before bedtime. It was not found that evening, and was not found yesterday, and was not found today. What was the subject of the mural? It had to do with the circus, I understand. Yes, it is of the cast members of the troupe. The principal ones. That means it would have included a representation of Vittoria also, I said to the man, wondering if it had occurred to him that in both instances she was connected to the stolen object in some way. Yes, she is on the mural. In the bottom right, painted as standing on top of her horse. She is, of course, one of our troupe's named performers. Then you suspect this Geller, Jr., of taking these things from your office, said Holmes. It is the only thing that makes sense to me, that he would take from me my mural. He knew that I paid for its creation, and especially prized it as an important conversation piece. I also enjoy it for its own sake. It represents my achievement here, something of a personal testament. Probably everyone knows how I feel about it. I cannot imagine why he would want the baton, yet it was the baton that was first stolen, said Holmes, looking to the man's desk where he said he had kept it until it had vanished. Again, another thing that I cannot fathom. Geller did not have any ill feelings toward Vittoria. He was in fact a rather inward sort. He didn't mix with anyone and didn't want to learn from anyone. His place was not in a circus, but the timing is certainly on the side of suspecting the young man, said Holmes. He becomes angry about his father's termination, and the thefts follow instantly. His participation, Mr. Holmes, makes sense to me because it is just as you have stated. The man and woman who were beside the manager lowered their heads, not wanting to be privy to the conversation when the actual accusation became a definite notion. I recognized the symptoms of remorse, sad thoughts about Geller the Senior and his loss of position and the friends he would have made, now no longer a part of their lives, nor theirs a part of his. Sherlock Holmes walked to the opening of this place that served as an office. I will ask of you permission to revisit you tomorrow. Let's say after lunch. I plan on producing Vittoria's baton. Whether I will have equally good fortune with your canvas, that depends on too many chances to determine. The group of three stood astonished, and I followed my friend out of the room. We once more enjoyed ourselves in Blackpool and played in its arcade section until sunset. When we returned to our hotel, Holmes asked for the use of the sitting room and spent his time there until late into the night. My friend ordered for us a breakfast of some magnificence, and I was overjoyed when I awoke and walked into our common room to see many foods laid out on the table. I rang for my coffee, and it arrived in minutes. So you have the thing solved, I said to my friend. It probably has little verifiable solution, he replied. Why so? I asked. We have nothing but speculative conjecture, he continued. We have an excellent suspect, but he has gone to parts unknown, and no one's going to track him down for a tort or a crime. That amounts to no more than a pittance of damages, or fine, why the baton and not the canvas? This had been on my mind since yesterday. It is ironic, replied Holmes, that the thing I believed to be a collateral matter when set against the sole purpose of taking the canvas turns out to be more available to our discovery than the principal element. Usually the principal element is found, and the collateral one remains undiscovered. We presented ourselves to the manager for what I presume to be a final time. You claim, Mr. Holmes, that you can produce my Bareback Rider's beloved prop, said the man as we entered his office with Vittoria, who we found in centre ring and took her with us, for I presumed the purpose of Holmes being able to brighten up her day before the circus opened. 4 others had followed the 3 of us into the managerial section of the tent. Sherlock Holmes spoke to Mr. Ridgmore, but all were giving him their attention in the matter. We have behind you both an interior canvas of which hooks have been affixed into it by means of hard thread, where this canvas has been staked to the ground, and behind that an exterior canvas, which is a part of the overall genuine circus tent, you have placed in this underground realm of yours to satisfy what would act for exterior walls for any structure, also staked to the ground. Yes, sir, said the manager, and we use the empty hooks to fully understand exactly where this mural canvas existed within this space, said Holmes. The man nodded an affirmative response. Pull up the tent stakes below the hooks and lift up the interior canvas, Holmes said in a masterly manner. The manager signalled to two men who stood behind me as my friend had begun his demonstration. These two employed a tool for prying, and once each of the stakes had been loosened, they worked their muscles to complete the job. First one was removed, and then another, and with each removal the canvas curved first outward and then upward. Holmes pointed to a third, and when this was removed from its position into the ground, a shaft of silver metal that had been pinned behind the canvas, between it and its exterior sister canvas, fell from its standing position to lay on the dirt floor. The missing baton. Vittoria could not contain herself, and took hold of my friend and hugged him with all her might. The men allowed their manager the privilege of picking up the instrument, and after a moment's examination of its condition and newly mounted reflective devices, he gave it to the joyful equestrian. "How say you?" the manager exclaimed. Holmes responded, "Let us suppose a man who wished to give you grief by taking from you your mural, he enters this area space while you are at dinner, to remove it from its place of honour. He realises the upper hooks which it is fastened to is too high for his reach. He looks about for a piece of furniture to move under the hooks so he can stand upon it, but there are only a few pieces, and these are massive and cannot, in the dirt, be dragged to be positioned under to where the canvas has been fixed. He sees on the desk this baton, and whether he understands its purpose is to have its cement become dried, or does not understand this. He takes the baton and uses it in an attempt to lift the canvas at its 6 hooking points, one after the other. But on his very first try, the baton leaves his hand and falls to the floor, but on the other side of the canvas, now wedged between the interior and exterior materials. The following evening he returns with some genuine means of dislodging the grommets from the hooks, and within minutes the mural falls to the ground at his feet. We will presume he clumsily rolls this up into some fashion, and moving to the canvas, to the left of the desk, one that is a genuine exterior wall, he dives under it and makes his escape. But there is a problem with his plan. He realises that even rolled up in such fashion, he cannot walk the perimeter with the now converted article. He must either disguise it or hide it, and be done with it. I cannot fathom which he chooses. If he is fearful of discovery, he would most probably choose an under the greater tent location for sliding the rolled-up mural, never to be discovered until the major tent is taken down, which will occur if your circus is a success, and a permanent structure replaces the existing major tent, or if your circus is a failure, and again the tent comes down. Are you saying, Mr. Holmes, that the mural may be in reach somewhere near or under the exterior tent? Matters probably lie in that direction, Holmes replied, but understand I only state a probability, which is as far as I can go under the circumstance. We shall search high and low, the man stated with a hopeful voice. Holmes and I were gifted excellent seats for the performance of the Tower Circus, the evening the tower was open to the public. Vittoria shined her smile at us every time she rode near to where we sat. I don't think my friend had ever been paid before in happiness. On its inaugural night, we spent 6pence to enter the Blackpool Tower and another 6pence to ride its lift to the top. The day after we returned to Baker Street, my friend received a telegram alerting him the mural had been found below the underbars that held up the concessions, some 60 feet from the exterior of the circus. Holmes reflected to me, if Geller the Junior was our thief, I give him greater credit than I had originally thought of him. He darted to the food stands, raised by these underbars, and tucked the mural there. Unlike the circus, the concessions will never be broken apart and moved away. He must have thought of that. I have never seen you so happy, I said to my friend. It's good to be alive, he said, as he struck a match and lit his pipe.